What a piece of work. And I think, Mark, let's talk about Nesbit and your decision to go to her, because I think, we have in our minds the textbook M.R. James story, the kind that we've been watching on TV since the 70s. The moral world of this is really different.
Yeah, I mean, as with Conan Doyle last year, it's a different set of toys to play with, but I was just, this is the first ghost story I ever read when I was about 7. I've always loved it, and I always wanted to do it. But it's interesting, it's quite a slight story, really. It's a great idea. It's not, and the more I read it a few times, and then I read Eleanor Fitzsimon's fantastic biography of Nesbit, and I thought there's something here. Alan Bennett talks about how writers are like people who are surprised at an airport and discover there's all kinds of things in their dirty washing they didn't know was there. And I think this story is throbbing with stuff. And the more I read about her, the more I was fascinated by her bizarre marriage and a strange husband and his dalliances. And I thought, it's really
sketch that in for us.
Well, it's exactly that.
Yes.
She and her husband Hubert had this marriage, and she took in her friend because she was pregnant by a married man, and then discovered it was Hubert's, and then they had another child, and all kinds of affairs. But I don't know. I just think there's something really interesting about it. And the more I read it, the more I thought, I think this is about the patriarchy. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I really think it is. And I think even if it's unconscious, it's very strong. Jack is so patronizing in the story, and I thought there's something to be mined here, which I found really fascinating. And I genuinely based it on some of it on a friend of mine from years ago who was in a very abusive relationship, and she used to tell me about how she would go back, and she used to lie. I'm not betraying any confidence. She used to lie in the bath with her partner, bathing her bruises, and they would make up stories between themselves as to how to account for it. And it was only when she was on the other side of it she realized how insane it was. So I just thought, there's something here. I think that scene at the bottom of the stairs, which has nothing to do with ghosts, is really something. I really do. It's very powerful.
It's to do with sin and transgression, though, isn't it? And how were those ideas handled when you were on the set, Monica? How did you discuss what really is? I mean, I think it's there in the subtext of the Nesbit story, but really it's been pushed up to the top in the adaptation.
Well, I suppose each time we were sort of just playing the reality of the scene, really, weren't we? I mean, for Mrs. Dorman, she sort of knows that she has to be, for whoever she's working for, she has to be this sort of character and sort of local storyteller. But at the same time, the status is really interesting as well. She sort of notices things. I think she's a perceptive woman, and but she's not in a position to expose them, so has to snatch her moments. And yeah, I mean, that scene at the bottom of the stairs it is frightening, but in a different way, I suppose. The psychology is frightening, isn't it?
Yeah, and I remember when we were filming it that we, you do it a few times from different angles, and we together found quite a lot of emotion there in that tiny little space. And I was really moved by what Monica was giving me, and there was something very, and with the text and the truth to the reality of that story, that it really developed in a way that actually wasn't helpful for narrative, because Laura is in far more denial in this place than so I was bringing my own kind of sympathies and sadness at her story into that room that actually didn't need to be there. So it was really interesting finding
we had to hide it from him as well, because he was, it's a very real thing. I mean, if somebody's in a relationship like that, how do you, in shopping centres, people give out pens saying phone this number on the pen, and there are apps that can help you, and sort of so much of your life might be being controlled that it's finding the moments that you can find a small escape, I guess, or some kind of hope.
How was it for you, Aina, as the perpetrator? I mean, what you would, the body language is so interesting, the way you kept touching her.
Yeah, that was something that Phoebe and I sort of spoke about just on the Monday when we arrived. It was like, but that's the sort of language of that controlling, coercive relationship, I guess, it's told a lot through body language, because I suppose there's always a mask put on. But then the mask thing was kind of interesting to explore, because it was 1880s Victorian England. There was, I guess, a bit of guesswork about, that maybe an abusive partner could get away with more in the way he presented that to the world. That actually, that body language is kind of maybe not picked up on as much then. So he can be very flagrant and blatant in those abuses. So, but we could have crafted it just through talking about it on set, just going, what does that feel like? That proximity and that sort of ownership, and it's great because you only got 5 days. You just sort of jump in and go, right, we're going to do this. We're going to decide on that, and
A few more days for you though, I think, because you're in both dimensions of this story, carrying this character across.
Yeah, we love a story within a story. We love 2 timelines,
2 weeks. 2 weeks.
Flexing those actor muscles and 2 timelines. No, I love that, but I also it is still very much like, go in, don't overthink it, do it. Like, it was over before we could even. Do you know what I mean? It was like, I really wanted more of it. It was so nice. It was just shot in the countryside. I never leave London. So it was
Do you think about the relationship between those two characters? Obviously, one is kind of in the imagination of E. Nesbit, and one is in a world that is, is the real world. But did you think of what they might have in common? Because I thought, is he his dad at one point?
That's an interesting
because he said, I moved here 5 years ago, but the doctor in the story has been with his mother, hasn't he? And read the story.
We talked about it in March, like how are we going to do we make them different? How different? And I actually quite like the idea of, thought about the logic of it. And Edith is a story within a story. It's obviously fictional, but she's imbuing it with things from her life, clearly. So I thought, well, then I think she's also putting into the story things she knows about Zubin, and they've got to know about each other over time. And then I thought about it more, and I thought, it's actually almost quite interesting, because she's kind of like written a romantic thing between them. And I thought, she's shipping herself into like a little situation with
exactly
Zubin. I thought that was interesting. So I kind of, like, also with the piece this short, I thought if both timelines can inform what this character is about, then I quite like actually that they were quite similar.
But mostly one has a mustache and one doesn't.
Yeah. But also the relationship between the Doctor and Nesbit is the most wholesome one in the story, isn't it?
I think it's deeply erotic actually.
That was just Celia.
Art is for you to project on. So, but no, it is. It's beautiful, actually. And, he's someone who feels like an outsider in this town, even though a lot of the people in this town rely on him. And that's a very, contradictory thing to feel towards the people you live around. So I think she's his rock in a weird way, and he's hers.
I want to talk to you about kind of being Victorian. And, when you put those whiskers on, somehow you look like you don't look like this when sitting here. In there, you look like a fragment of the 19th century that somehow found its way into the present day.
Brilliant. I grieved that when it was gone. I really did. That's why I'm wearing this cap. I just can't believe I don't have that hair anymore. It was amazing craft across, as you can tell, the world feels very, very real, and it's the first time I've seen it. I think any of us have seen it, and. One of the things that struck me is that it feels very unshowy in being Victorian. It doesn't feel like it's drawing attention to itself with sort of, like a kind of elaborate design or anything like that. It's very simple, and I think what I loved about that is it makes it feel like, yes, it's Victorian, but it's also like it feels as familiar as the world we're in right now. I don't know, and but it has some of the flair of that period that we all love and want to have.
Got a penny farthing in it.
But
Make sure that got in.
in the doll factory, you were sort of proximate to the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, were you? But I think you probably... Is he in the pre-Raphaelite? Has he been kicked out of the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood? Is he a minor member?
He's yet to be discovered.
Yeah.
That's what we'll define.
Yet to be discovered, yes.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm so, most of the team have done the last few, and it's we had one more day than last year. So to get this done in such a tight schedule, it's entirely reliant on everyone being so brilliant and also so up for it, you know, and cast and crew alike. It's a joy to do. It's over so quickly, but it's so precious. I think I'm thrilled that we've been able to continue to do them, and I'm just lost in admiration for everyone's talent and patience, you know. And we'd only get a few goes at each thing, but I'm really proud of this one. I think it's very powerful, and it's not, you know, ghost story. It is a ghost story. It's still got some Ray Harryhausen bits in it, but ultimately I think it's about a lot of things, and I think it's lovely when you sort of almost accidentally find those things in it, which is what I think has happened here.
Well, it is so rooted in the story. It is a proper adaptation, but you've found things in it and amplified things in it that make it something. You know, it's just very different from that what I suppose is like the customary narrative of the incompetent academic who messes with the past, and the past comes and punishes him. Here, you know, the dynamics of who's at fault and who is being punished and what for are so much more complicated.
Well, you know, that's the Jamesian archetype, isn't it? Which is fantastic. But it's as with Conan Doyle last year, it's wonderful to try something different. And I found really last year the whole language of Doyle was so different. It was like, gosh, this is, even just adapting it felt unusual, you know. And it's very exciting now. I think that's why it's brilliant to tackle someone different and to hopefully find new stuff in it. You know, I as I say, I've always loved the story, and then finding a way of, you know, who is the woman of stone, and actually sort of reframing it as if Nesbit is telling a story of her own she knows, but choosing to tell it differently now she's on her deathbed, and thinking maybe I should have been more like this. I find that really exciting.
Yeah, so man-size in marble still exists, doesn't
Very
it, in the
much.
world of this?
Yeah.
Did you find the story useful if you went to it, Monica?
Yeah, I did.
Because she's very different, isn't she, Mrs. Dorman? You know, whether or not the niece really exists, for instance, is
Well,
like
that was one of the points where I found the story very useful, because reading the script, I wasn't quite certain when she said that she wanted time off on Thursday next. It wasn't quite clear to me how much she was really, really frightened herself. And even when she's telling the story, she's invited to tell ghost stories, so she starts to talk about the grey lady, which she probably doesn't really believe. But then when he says about the two knights, that's when, and she doesn't even call them ghosts. She says, "You mean those two bodies?" Like they're very real. And just in terms of the logic of the piece, when I read the short story, it was very clear to me that, like, oh, she's actually really, really tangibly frightened of these two bodies that come to that place, and she's working there and she does not want to be there that night.
And how was it useful for you, Phoebe?
It was it's very revealing of Jack, and I think Laura's very familiar with who she signed up her life to, and so to get to know him was really, really helpful in that. Laura isn't written in particular detail, but I think there's detail in the absence of that, and so Mark drew upon that in the script, and I ran with it. You know, her silence is loud, so.
It's written in the first person from his point
Yes,
of view,
absolutely.
isn't it? And sort of telling the story of how he lost her. So it is quite different. Yeah. She's a bit more objectified, maybe.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but really, in a way, it's a kind of the exchange in the story is really between the husband and the doctor. Dr. Kelly is in the short story, isn't he? So, what was the text any use for you, since it was so different?
I found it fascinating, but I didn't feel like I massively informed my character, because I feel like the doctor in the script kind of sort of took off into his own thing. But I found it more fascinating for, like, the language, and, you know, like Jack calls her pussy in the
Wifey,
and all
what
these
a,
little
what
words.
a chilling word. That is.
And I thought it was fascinating, all the stuff you mined out of it. I thought, Mark, like. Yeah, it was interesting. It's always...
that's what Hubert used to call her, pussy and wifey and all those things. And it's I know I'd love to do a biography of Nesbit. That's what I would do. Does anyone know The Enchanted Castle? It's not much known. It's another one with 5 children in it and Phoenix in the Carpet, but there are these things in it called the Ugly Wugglies. And I'd never read it. And she had this, you can read this in the Radio Times, because I've written a story about it, but she had a childhood experience in Nesbit, seeing some mummies in Bordeaux. And she thought, she was very homesick, and she thought it was going to be like the British Museum, and it was this catacomb full of desiccated corpses, including a baby hanging by its hair. And it terrified her, and it left a residue her entire life. And her stories are full of inanimate things coming to life. And the most frightening one, apart from this story, are the Ugly Wugglies in the Enchanted Castle, who are, the kids have a magic ring, and they put a show on, and they have to create an audience because they haven't got one. And they make an audience out of old clothes and golf clubs and gloves and things. And then the ring brings them to life, and they shamble into town like zombies. And she says they spoke as if they had no roofs to their mouths. And then amazingly, they become instantly middle class. And one of them says to one of the kids, "Could you give me the direction of a good hotel?" Absolutely petrifying. So that's what I want to do next.
Well, I think you'd all be up for that. I think.
Start working on the voices now.
Do you have a relationship with the ghost story?
Do I?
Yeah, all of you. I'm interested in what you all think about that. Yeah.
With this ghost story or the ghost story
With
in general?
with the genre, with ghosts themselves, perhaps we always get onto that in these discussions. What
Get
about
onto
your
it.
own reading? What are the stories that haunted you?
Oh, well, I brought one into ADR, didn't I? The monkey's paw.
Oh yes.
I thought that might be an interesting one for Mark to do, because I think it's only one location and like 5 characters.
I like the way you think.
Always practical. Yeah, that's a really chilling one.
Okay, this is not the most cultured, but when do you know
Is it the
Courage?
Muppets Christmas Carol?
Yeah. Piece of art. No, I do love that. But, Courage the Cowardly Dog. Do you remember?
yes.
Such a sick cartoon. That was like very. That
Who was
was
the
very
Cowardly Dog?
formative for me as a child. Courage the Cowardly
Oh,
Dog,
no,
and it was
yeah.
about this dog who basically got abused by like the like granddad, and the grandma was like always took care of him. But they went this like in the house in the middle of nowhere, and there was all these sort of like ghosts and demons that would sort of haunt, and only he would have to deal with them. And he was petrified, and he was so incompetent with dealing with these ghosts. And
I should speak to Mark Bell from BBC Two over there.
no, but if a live action remake, and I'm the dog, Mark. Let's go.
There's a great Conor McPherson's got a play called Saint Nicholas, which is an amazing play, and it's just like one guy in a room. I saw it with Brendan Coyle, and he just starts telling a story that starts off as like he's an art critic who feels like he's got like not one redeeming quality left. So he goes off to London for Christmas by himself, and he meets vampires, and it's terrifying, hilarious. And I think like a great ghost story, it feels like I'm going to wheel out the thing I said earlier, but it's like the ghost within and the ghost without. Like it feels like he's become the monster that he meets, and I just love stories that fuse it so well. And I have to say, just watching this as well, I didn't see that scene that Celia Mowan did, but like to see her playing Edith Nesbit, using a story in the way that we all use stories to sort of make sense of her own past or life, or even just to entertain herself or to get some kind of justice in the moment, is an amazing detail, I think. Yeah.
And the telling of it, the act of telling is important.
Incredible,
isn't it?
yeah. And it just puts such a different context on the whole idea of ghost stories and Christmas ghost stories, that we tell them for a reason at this time of year, because I don't know, they feel closer to us or something, or they feel sort of in the air.
Yeah.
And I just love that detail. I thought, oh, brilliant! Like that's it doesn't really matter whether it happened or didn't happen now. That makes it sort of powerful. That makes it true. That she tells it in that moment.
Phoebe, what about you?
Well, I'm trying to think.
What makes you shiver?
What makes me shiver? Not much. Probably a lot. But I'm trying. There's a cartoon that I remember being so haunted by, and that's
Oh, grow up.
We can double bill these next year, can't we?
Well, it's not even about ghosts, I don't think. So I'm really veering
Is it
off.
Scooby-Doo?
Yeah, it's Shaggy. I just laugh. No, it's about. My sister might be able to help me. It's about a house and little Charlie and the Chocolate Factory actors in it, and he plays twins, I think. And you have to put salt around the haunted house because there are all these creatures in the woods that come tumbling towards you. And if you don't make the boundary, they're in and they're going to, get you. Anyway, that was really, really haunting for me, and I'm being really unhelpful because I cannot for the life of me remember the name.
Maybe it was just a nightmare that you had. It
Yeah,
was something you saw on the telly.
It was
or
in the
the film.
Gremlin realm, when I first watched the Gremlin films. But actually, on what Aina was just saying, what this has brought to me anyway is a new tradition, which my Christmases are so cozy and gorgeous in my family, but I don't have much tradition. And since meeting Mark, I think this is something that has been invited into that, and I feel I'm really excited to involve myself in the ghost story tradition.
begins.
Well, there's a big back catalogue now, isn't there? And in fact, Mark, have you now? I mean, it's not a competition, but have you beaten Lawrence Gordon Clark now? Do you think? No. How many-
Equal.
Okay.
Not for long, right?
But 7 is a magic number.
Yes.
Gotta get to it. Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, I'm just thrilled. I'm thrilled it's become a tradition again, and people embrace it so wholeheartedly. It's a strange thing. It's like all traditions. It comes and goes. People think it's been there forever. If it's not there, they go, "Where is it?" But it's I have to take my hat off. The BBC is so amazingly supportive because it's so hard to find the money for what is essentially a half-hour play. It's an extinct slot, and to keep it going like this is just so brilliant. And I love getting feedback from people and how much they look forward to it. It's just wonderful, and I hope we can continue as long as time lasts. This is our last Christmas, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, because of the world situation. But we might as well enjoy ourselves.
But the weight of it now favours the present, doesn't it? I mean, in a way, when this started, it felt like a callback to those 70s adaptations. But now, in a way.
Well, I mean, it's who knows? It's a huge smorgasbord. Lawrence Gordon Clark did M.R. James and then Dickens and then brand new stories.
Yeah.
I've done an original story back in 2018. It's just always trying to find the mix of what the commissioners want and also what you sort of expect to happen. I remember I was going to do an original one in 2020, and then COVID happened. By the time we got ourselves together, I thought, what, people want M.R. James. And I chose the Mezzotint specifically then because it was so doable. It's a static story about a picture with a small cast, and these things always come into play. I mean, we're so blessed to use my little black book and get all these wonderful people to do it for tuppence halfpenny. but it's dependent on that goodwill, but also sheer practicality. I mean that it would be lovely to have 7 days instead of 5. It would be lovely to have a little bit more, but the entire cast and crew worked so hard to make it look this beautiful. It really does. I must say, my favourite thing is how accidentally this looks like the cover of the Radio Times in 1972. Yes. It just does.
Is it entirely accidental?
I think it's
Because
the lens.
There is that sort of. There's a certain way that the 19th century looked on screen in the 70s. And I can't quite describe it, but that is what that is, isn't
It's a
it?
bit like the palaces.
Is it something to do with the design? Something to do with the makeup? Is it really like as much as looking like the way that Phoebe has been made up and the way that she's dressed in this? There's
I think they're the
about
same costumes. Claire Finney
stank.
Thompson will tell you.
What?
They stank.
Oh, really?
They're brilliant.
Yes. What? Because they were possessed by
Eric
something. What about ghosts themselves? I mean, I think over the years you've mapped your thoughts on this
Yes.
out. But every year we get to discover
Well, the thing
where a new guest can stand on the
It's
supernatural.
true, yes. Yeah. But briefly, Radio Times, bless them, every year I do the same interview. It's like, why do we like Christmas and ghosts? I said, why don't you just reprint last year's? And I rejig it. But this year they've commissioned a story, which is great. So I said, yes, I'll do it. I'm so thrilled to do something different. But you know how I feel about ghosts. Go on. Do you believe?
Yes.
Okay. Just out of conviction, or has there been? Have you got experience in this area?
Make it out of that.
No, I have no experience. I just feel like the critical mass of stories told, like that you've heard from your aunt and your cousin and everyone, like leads me to believe. But I've had no paranormal experiences whatsoever.
Would you like one?
Love one,
not that
yeah.
I can do anything about it.
I'd love one. If anyone can answer that.
Going to move the glasses or something.
Yeah.
Take him for dinner first. do people here believe? How many people
Can we
believe?
do a show of hands?
Yeah, show of hands if you
Nobody.
believe in a ghost. Ghosts.
All these rational. Oh, look, they're getting less rational as the.
And if you don't, yes, most people in it.
What are you doing here?
Yeah.
I certainly do. Yeah, and like Aina, I haven't had an experience, but very close people in my life have, and I want one.
Yeah.
So whatever I can do.
Please.
Anything that you can tell us, or would that break a confidence to say something about your friend's experiences?
Oh, yeah. Well, it was my sister, actually. I told this just now. I'm repeating myself. But yeah, say it again. It was our Nanny Mary. She passed that year, my mum's nan, and her ashes were in the mantelpiece. Were at home. So she was with us, in her physical form. And I think she was famously quite scared of the dark. So, there were light switches that were coming on and swinging, and they'd definitely been turned off. All of that was starting to happen. And then there was a time in our home where my sister and I would alternate nights sleeping with mum, just for a second, but it was very cute. And it was my sister's turn, and she woke up in the middle of the night to see a woman stood by her bed, an older woman. She couldn't quite work out who it was. Assumed, of course, because she looked so real, that it was mum. Stood next to her watching, just checking, or she got up for a wee or something like that. And she reached her leg back, I think, and felt mum fast asleep in the bed next to her, and was still, locked eyes with this woman. And as she looked closer, her sort of tight permed hair became clear, and her glasses chain or whatever became clear. I can't remember the details now. And then the cat jumped through her and she was gone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And you've got a very good, clear account of this. This isn't
because she
isn't
told
like,
it
this
all
happened
the time.
Okay. But often it's like, a friend of a friend, and it was many years ago. There's none of that.
No.
Should we do another show of hands and see how many people?
Yeah, anybody change their mind because of what they've heard from Phoebe?
I've got one actually.
Yeah, go on.
And this really happened,
Yeah.
So I swear. I swear. So I was in Edinburgh, I was performing at the Fringe, right? Me and my friend, we were staying in this basement flat. And it was connected to this like 4-story old Georgian townhouse. And there was this old lady living in it. She had the whole house to herself, which already spooky. So we came home so we were out after a show, and my friend was like flirting with this guy, and I was like, oh, I'm done with this, so I'm gonna go home. So I went home and I had the whole flat to myself. But then when I was in the toilet, I heard footsteps like creaking, right? So I thought my friend Kathleen came back. So I went out and I was like, Kathleen, nothing, right? And then I realized that the door to the house, which is always locked, was open. So I was a bit spooked out. I was like, someone been through. And then the door to the garden was also open, which it led up to the garden. So then I checked every room in the basement flat to see if anyone was in it. No one was in it. So I went up to the house and I started asking for the lady. I was like calling out her name. She wasn't in. But then I went into a bathroom and had a bath. I don't think that's relevant.
As you told us.
Because I was really spooked out and there was nowhere to lock myself in, so I locked myself in the bathroom.
Yeah, but
I put up the sash window, get some fresh air. So I'm finally like relaxing, my heart rate's coming down. And then all I hear is... and there's glass everywhere in the bathtub. I've got glass on my hands, and I realised the sash window has come down, from its own weight. So nothing too ghostly, but terrifying.
Wow. Are you
So
sure?
so then I go all the way back down to his house, creeped out, go to the basement flat, and I go to tell my friend Kathleen to see if she's back, and she's asleep in bed. So I don't wake her up. I go to sleep. The next day I meet her out in town, and I'm like, this is what happened. I'm shitting myself, and I had the house to myself, and then I saw you were asleep, so I didn't disturb you. And she said, oh no, I didn't come back. I went home with the guy. Who the fuck did I see sleeping?
Blimey! Wow.
True story.
Okay,
I think that I saw her hair and everything.
No, I think you brought someone back and forgot. That's Edinburgh.
I think we need to do that show of hands. I hope we're reaching a kind of critical mass. Monica, dare I ask you, or?
Well, I think the actual world's probably complicated enough.
Yes.
So, but there was one, not really story, but when my brother was at university, he was sharing a room with another student, and he said to his friend, "What are you doing by the door?" And he said, "I'm not by the door." So they thought he'd seen someone by the door that wasn't there.
I mean, it's more low
That's all
key,
I've got.
but it's powerful. It's powerful.
It sounds more real.
Yes. Phew. Well, as Monica says, the world is a difficult place. It seems to be getting more difficult, but we still seem to need something in stories like this.
I think we like stories. I think that's what it is, isn't it?
But are they in a...
I don't think there's more to it. I do think there is supernatural frequencies and.
Oh, shit.
I think we underestimate our imaginations.
No, because I don't know, especially at a time like
That's the
Christmas,
Christmas card
there's all this social pressure to be jolly, and a lot of people are in actually quite fucked up, dark situations, especially at a time like Christmas. And I actually think it's important to have space to let the darkness breathe and acknowledge it rather than suppress it.
Well, maybe this is when we think about the relationship between the Christmas and the ghost story, we do think about that idea of the darkest moment and the light coming and the veils being thin between worlds. But there is that other side of it being a time when people
I think
are not in a great place
I think
psychologically.
It's very, very strongly. Christmas is a very difficult time for so many people, and it's partly. I've always thought that the jollity, that it's the shadow of the Christmas tree, the shadow of the fairy lights. That's why we like it. I think it's weirdly the two things go together so perfectly. But actually, there is also something psychologically interesting about why we want to do it now, when it's supposed to be so sort of happy and and lest we forget, it was Jesus himself.
But is it really consoling? I mean, I'm thinking particularly of the story that we've seen tonight, where the ghost story is used as a space to explore domestic violence, coercive control. Doesn't seem wrong to encounter it in this kind of context, does it?
I think in a way it makes the ghost story more present. It makes you feel more frightened, maybe.
I just find it very interesting, and I think that's something I'd like to explore more. Is when it's all all the mechanics is there, all the things you want. I did debate with myself whether you should see anything, because you don't in the story. It's just the finger.
Yeah.
And I thought, I know if I don't film this, I will regret it.
Yeah.
And I think it was the right thing to do, because you want those moments. But equally, it's really interesting to use that sort of vehicle for all kinds of other ideas. And I think all the most interesting things do, don't they? Because especially in a genre piece, if you expect it to be one thing and then it's actually freighted with a lot of other stuff, I think that's really exciting, actually. So, yeah.
And it's a very material ending for a ghost story, isn't it? The finger, and it's one line, isn't it, at the end, almost with an exclamation mark at the end, isn't it? There's a sort of odd unsubtlety about the way that Nesbit writes it. What does the finger mean to you, Mark?
Well, there's a lot of literature about what the finger means. I think
Edith's giving the finger to Hubert. Well, you know, it's. I think that's what I tried to mine in it. I think it is very interesting what it says about husbands and wives and the period. And you know, Nesbit is really frustrating. You sort of want her retrospectively to be much more of a. She wasn't a feminist at all. She didn't really think that women should have the vote. What she said, what next? Dogs? Or maybe her husband said that. Yeah, and it's like why not? She was this incredible independent woman who ran the household with her stories, and she was really something. You know, friend, possible lover of Shaw, H.G. Wells, founder member of the Fabians. Incredible life, amazing imagination, and then and yet she put up with all this stuff from her husband, and I think you know, that's what I've tried to sort of dig out of her.
I think that sort of repression's in there as well. I mean, I love the way that you know, Mrs. Dorman puts the finger in her handbag, and that's sort of her revenge on her husband, really. And I think she's genuinely concerned that this man might do that to somebody else.
Yeah.
And you know, with her status and everything, it's sort of the only power that she has.
And Mrs. Dorman is a figure of vengeance in this.
She's a fury.
Or a figure of justice.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely.
What I didn't
Yes.
what I didn't tell Monica is that Mrs. Dorman does this every year. The house lies empty. Some people move in. She frames the husband.
How
Hangs
many
him,
picking
moves
them
on.
off one
Yeah.
by one?
Well, she does it every year. We hope that we can do this every year as well. It's time for us to thank our panel. So you applaud them all the way to Christmas, please.